Hi everyone, how are you doing this evening? Or morning, or whatever time it is where you are. I know what you're thinking. Why am I live streaming on a Saturday evening in the US? And why did I not get notified of this? Well, I just had this idea of creating a video this weekend about what I've been reading recently, since I haven't really been making a lot of videos, and yet I have been reading quite a bit. Hold on, let me see if I can fix the lighting. Okay, I'm not really sure if that's an improvement. Oh dear. Okay, well, we'll just go with that. Yeah, so I had this idea of talking about what I've been reading lately, and I wanted to do a, quote, proper video on it. But honestly, I realized I wasn't going to have time to edit this weekend, so I thought, why don't I just do a live stream? I don't think many people will be watching it live, but at least I'll have the video filmed, and hopefully we'll stay on some kind of reasonable script. So yeah, it's been an interesting summer so far, and I have certainly been reading quite a bit more lately, which I'm happy to say. It's been kind of the highlight of the year so far. I guess I'll start with a book that I am almost finished with. Well, almost 2/3 finished, which is The Secret History. Let me pull it up on my iPad here. The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And I think I mentioned this in my last video, but I thought I would just sort of, without giving too much away, try to talk a little bit more about how I'm feeling about it. Not totally sure how much of a video I'm going to be doing on this yet. Yeah, for those of you who may not have seen the last video or are not familiar, The Secret History by Donna Tartt is, I want to say it was published in the 90s, fairly recently. This isn't like a really old classic, but it has seen a resurgence in popularity recently with the dark academia movement, and because, as I mentioned in my previous video, it takes place at this college in New England, and it's essentially a murder mystery told in reverse. So we start out knowing who done it, and the narrator kind of walks us through what led up to those events. So it's kind of a dark story. I mean, not just in terms of dark academia, but the whole premise. I don't think I've ever read a mystery that was told from the criminal's perspective, at least not to this extent. I mean, I think there's a couple of Agatha Christie novels maybe that do that, but this is kind of it just goes way back to the backstory of the characters and really leads you from day one, so to speak, of their relationships, or at least most of the relationships that involve the narrator. So as far as how I'm feeling about it, so it is a very long book. I think I mentioned before it's well over 500 pages. I personally feel like this book is a bit too long. Because the story, by the way, there is some background noise. I don't really know what that is, if it's my computer or a vacuum cleaner in another room. Anyway, sorry for the background noise. But anyway, yeah, very long book. I feel like not a lot happens, and it's a pretty simple story, so we spend a lot of time with the characters, and yet, personally, I don't feel like I like any of the characters except the antagonist, interestingly enough. And I really wish I did. I think that in a book like this, if you're going to take your time with the story and you're not going to make the plot exceedingly intricate, but just sort of focus on the character relationships, then I don't think it works so well to have all the characters more or less following the same motives, I guess, or the same lines of reasoning. And I don't think that's very much of a simplification, because really the group of students that this book follows act more as a unit than as individuals. And I think in a book of this length, given that I don't really like any of those characters, it just feels a bit, I don't know. In parts, it is a little tedious. Now, there are things I do enjoy about this. Donna Tartt has beautiful prose, which I think I mentioned previously. And she really harkens back, especially in the beginning of the novel, to very, I'd say, early 20th century style. I feel like that these characters all belong to a bygone era, and I don't mean the 1990s, but actually going back to either, I mean, some characters seem like maybe 1960s, but others, I feel like they're from the 1930s or something, which, you know, has kind of a mixed effect, because on the one hand, I do enjoy the prose, I do enjoy the old soul, old timiness of how the characters talk, but it does feel a little bit anachronistic in parts, which is not necessarily bad. I mean, she's trying to take you back to this place, Hamden College, and really immerse you in some history, primarily the Greeks, the ancients that these students are studying, and especially embodied in their common instructor, Julian Morrow. I only wish that Julian was in the book a little more. I think that he's a very interesting, elusive character in his own right. He kind of shepherds this group of students into a very close-knit community. He's very selective about who he teaches, and he endeavors to keep these students to himself, literally, and not allow them to take classes with other professors, which, I mean, it seems a little unimaginable, but it's fun, you know, it's an interesting premise, and it is the mechanism by which this body of students grows so close to each other. Definitely reminiscent of Dead Poets Society. So if you've seen the movie with Robin Williams, which features a very similar group of students that are passionate about literature and poetry and plays and the arts in general. This is kind of like that, except these students are even more focused on Greek literature specifically, and ancient languages and such. So yeah, most of the book is about that, about their dynamics with each other, and the actual crime scene, if you will, happens towards the end of book 1, which takes you, I think, pretty much right to the middle of this novel. And yeah, like I said, don't want to give too much away. I think what I will say, though, is I do have quibbles with the characterizations. I think I mentioned earlier how they all seem very similarly motivated, and I feel like Tartt often divulges information kind of randomly, or along the way, information that she tells you is kind of important to the character, but if so, you would think we'd have heard about it earlier in more detail. Yeah, so I struggle with some of that characterization. I do like the premise of the story in that it's kind of, in my experience, not something I've really read before, and I hope that she delves a little deeper into the psychology of somebody who decides to commit a murder. She kind of alludes to it in a few places, and at the beginning of book 2, we get this moment of self-reflection from Richard, the narrator, and how he views himself at that point. I think she could have done a lot more really to delve into that, but it could still come ahead in the ending of the novel. And at this point, I am indeed curious to see how it will turn out. There's a couple of theories I have about how she's going to wrap things up, and I'm being very careful not to read any spoilers because, I would say things definitely pick up in the middle of the book, and now I'm anxious to see how it ends. So, yep, that's kind of my where I'm at on my journey with The Secret History. Would I recommend it? I don't know yet. Will I be doing a video on it? I'm not sure. I think it really depends what she reveals in the final part of the book. And I don't want to, I don't know. I don't really have a lot more to say quite yet. That's Secret History. So another book I'm reading currently, and this one is for the Reading the World. This is Wilson Harris, Palace of the Peacock. Yeah, I wish I had done some better lighting here. It's gonna be pretty low quality. But anyway, Palace of the Peacock. What is this about? This is by Wilson Harris is, I believe, from Guyana, and he wrote a series of novels, which he called a quartet. And really, so I read the author's note to this book, and I'll be honest that I feel like I don't understand what he's really alluding to. My biggest takeaway from the author's note is that he's trying to emulate traditional music from his country in the cadence of this prose, and also touch upon themes of imperialism and colonialism, those kind of things. Honestly, though, most of the introduction went well over my head. And the first chapter or two, let's see, I read one chapter. I'm going to finish reading the first 2 books this evening, and tomorrow morning probably. But yeah, it's very highly metaphorical, I would say. But I was talking to somebody online, and they really liked this book, and they said to really think about it as a inverse retelling of Heart of Darkness, which is a book that I really have read quite a few times and am actually reading right now. So that's kind of a good segue. Whoops. Hi, Possible Pilot. I am just sort of going over some books that I have been reading. So I started out talking about The Secret History and going into that a bit more for the first, I guess, 15 minutes of this stream. Now I'm getting into like classics and stuff. So Palace of the Peacock by Wilson Harris from Guyana. A very esoteric novel for me thus far, but we'll see how it goes as I get a bit further into it. I'm going to be trying to finish the first half this evening, and then related to this is rereading Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, and honestly, I would have finished this by now if I'd actually just focused on it, but I have read it several times before, so I think just with some various other things I've been juggling, I didn't feel able to sit down with it yet. But I think reading these two things together is going to be very helpful for Palace of the Peacock, based on what I've heard from other people and based on the similarities of their plots. So they're both about voyages down a river, I believe. And also about themes of imperialism and colonialism. So, yeah. So what really distracted me from Heart of Darkness was a book that came in from the library, and I will bring it up on my iPad. I have like 2 or 3 days to keep it before I have to return it. And this book is one I've been waiting for a little bit. It is Chest Story by Stefan. Okay, my brother told me how to say his last name earlier today and I've already forgotten. So anyway, Chest Story. And this is a book that quite a few people really seem to like on Goodreads and around the blogosphere and stuff. And I'm going to jump into that in just a minute. Let's see. Possible Pilot says, reading a biography of Teddy Roosevelt. That sounds pretty cool. He was such a character, wasn't he? I remember he was in a group called the Rough Riders. I don't recall what they were doing, though, if they were cowboys or something else. Yeah, so Chest Story. This is a book. Let's see, when was it written? Okay, so this was published posthumously. Stefan, why don't I just look up how to say his name right now? Let's see if I can do that without losing my stream here. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know what the background noise is. It might actually be my computer, so we are having a bit of a heat wave right now, so I think the fan is working overtime. Let me see if I can pull up his name on Forvo here. Okay. Zweig. Stefan Zweig. Zweig. Okay. Stefan Zweig. Zweig. So, Chest Story by Stefan Zweig. Zweig. Let me read the chat here. The Rough Riders fought in Cuba against the Spanish during the Spanish-American War. They were the first United States volunteer cavalry. Oh, that's cool. Okay, I'm gonna have to find a documentary on that or something. That sounds very interesting. We did study the Spanish-American War and William McKinley in one of my college history classes. It went by a bit quickly, but I do remember that was a very interesting conflict. So, Stefan Zweig, his Chest Story was published posthumously. He grew up in Austria, but he left his country Let's see. First he moved to England in 1935, and then he moved to Brazil in 1940. A couple years later, he and his wife committed suicide together. He was very deeply depressed by what he was seeing in the world with the Nazis and what was happening in Europe at the time. So even though he was able to get away and live in relative safety in Brazil, he decided he wasn't going to live with it anymore. So this novel was discovered and published afterwards. And it's a very short little book. It's really a novella, I would say, about 60-ish pages. And I really love the opening of Chess' story. It goes, on the great passenger steamer due to depart New York for Buenos Aires at midnight, there was the usual last-minute bustle and commotion. Visitors from shore shoved confusedly to see their friends off. Telegraph boys in cocked caps dashed through the lounges, shouting names. Trunks and flowers were carried past, and inquisitive children ran up and down the companionways, the orchestra playing imperturbably on deck all the while. So, the beginning of this book takes place, or rather the whole book takes place on this voyage from from New York to Argentina. And it's interesting because you could definitely draw a parallel there between Zweig's voyage from England to Brazil. And there's definitely this, I don't know, there's little moments in this book that you think could very well have been autobiographical, but in any case, the narrator is on this voyage and he hears that there is a great chess master on board. And so, naturally, I mean, being close to celebrity, he's eager to know what this guy's abilities are like. And this chess master is on his way to play a great tournament in Brazil. So, narrator and others try to come up with a way to get this reclusive chess master to play a game for them. Or rather, I think, to play against him, I think is their scheme. So there's also this, I believe he's Scottish, this guy on board who is absolutely determined to play against the chess master, whose name is... If I say his name, I'm sure I'm going to butcher it. But anyway, I'm going to say Chentovich, but I'm not sure that's right. So anyway, yes, the chess master is very reclusive, and he doesn't want to really mingle with people. He just wants to focus on the games, and that's all he really cares about, lives for, and breathes for. Carla says, hi from Buenos Aires. Well, that's cool. We're just talking about Buenos Aires in the story, or the novella Chess story. Possible Pilot says, there's a podcaster named Dan Carlin who does a history podcast with an episode on the Spanish-American War. Cool, I will definitely check that out. I do like podcasts, and sometimes I listen to them when I'm working and stuff. So this group of passengers finally figures out a way to put together a game against this chess master. They all gather their heads together, and led by this Scottish man who's just a riot. He's awesome. And then, the humor is wonderful. Peaceable, idle passengers though we were, we had suddenly been seized by a wild, ambitious bellicosity, tantalized and aroused by the thought that the palm might be wrested from the champion right here on this ship in the middle of the ocean, a feat that would then be telegraphed around the world. So the chess master's also a little bit arrogant and aloof, and they just think, wow, we could take him down and now we'd be famous. So they start this game, and there's another passenger on board, this Dr. B. That's all we know. His name is Dr. B. And he kind of, he happens by the group, and he looks over, and he's like, don't move there. You're about to make a bad move. And then he gets involved in the game, and they start taking his advice. And pretty soon they realize they have two chess masters on board, and this Dr. B is just the more mysterious of the two. So the narrator, he decides to track down this Dr. B and ask him if he will play against Chantovich. And after he meets Dr. B formally, Dr. B tells him the story of how he learned how to be a chess master. And the story, so the story of his becoming a chess master is sort of the bulk of this book, or at least the second half. And it talks about how he used chess to endure solitary confinement in the hands of the Nazis, and how he would memorize like over 100 chess games to keep his mind occupied. But the problem is, as he was learning these games and memorizing them, well, first of all, he got bored, and secondly, he really wanted to start creating new games, but that presented the challenge of actually playing two sides. So not simply memorizing a game that had already been played in the past by other chess players, but coming up with his own games and trying mentally to play both sides, which, as you can imagine, paired with his solitary confinement, doesn't end well. So I'm not going to say anything more. I wouldn't say there's a lot to spoil in this book, but I really enjoyed how Zweig built up the story, starting with that very pleasant scene that I read earlier, and then, along with some wry humor, he gradually builds up to this incredibly intense flashback where Dr. B is talking about his experiences in solitary confinement. So it goes from like 0 to 100 very, very gradually, and yet very naturally. And you just feel so many emotions. I mean, I think I was practically crying at one point, because the way he describes his loneliness and his struggle to keep a grip on himself is just extraordinary. And it wasn't really, a lot of books, may try to, I guess, I don't know. I think of some books as being like trying to really shock you and like use crazy setups and or vocabulary or whatever to really hit you. But this kind of book, it's more subtle, and I really liked the subtlety a lot. It's the kind of book that doesn't really try to add anything on. He just tells it very matter-of-factly, and I just appreciated that that invitation to the reader to use their imagination and not be, over-explained to, so that when you engage with the story, it just becomes even more powerful because you're filling in all those blanks on your own. Let's see if there were any more good quotes I wanted to share. I kind of went on for a long time about the plot, but I loved Chess Story. This was a solid 5 from me, and I only wish I had bought this one. I probably will. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, I really liked this. There are a couple of quotes he talks about in terms of describing what it's like to be in solitary confinement. As is well known, nothing on earth puts more pressure on the human mind than nothing. Locking each of us into a total vacuum, a room hermetically sealed off from the outside world, instead of beating us or exposing us to cold, this was meant to create an internal pressure that would finally force our lips open. So the reason he was in confinement was he had some information that they wanted to get from him, and they thought they could break him much easier if they just left him in a completely, almost completely bare room and just left him with his thoughts. All the time you were hopelessly alone with yourself, with your body, and with these 4 or 5 mute objects: table, bed, window, wash basin. You lived like a diver in a diving bell in the black sea of this silence. For that matter, like a diver who has guessed that the cable to the outside world has snapped, and that he will never be hauled out of the silent deep. There was nothing to do, nothing to hear, nothing to see. Nothingness was everywhere around me all the time, a completely dimensionless and timeless void. This reminded me, so another book I read that sort of goes over the same material, but it's a non-fiction account. It's called Fear No Evil by Nathan Sharansky, I think is his name. And it's about a man who went through very similar experiences during the USSR. And he talks about the importance of memorization and how he would memorize psalms and how that really helped him keep a grip on himself as he was imprisoned. And so Zweig's character, Dr. B, he says the same thing here. To occupy my mind, I tried to reconstruct and recite everything I had ever learned by heart, the anthems and nursery rhymes of childhood, the Homer I learned in grade school, the sections of the Civil Code. Then I tried arithmetic, adding and dividing random figures, but nothing stuck in my mind in that emptiness. Rachel asks, how much time would you say you read each day? It really depends. I think in general, I would probably read an hour to 2 hours a day. But some days I don't even read at all. I think last week there might have been even 2 days I didn't read. I have, a couple of book clubs I'm doing right now, which really keeps me going in terms of staying on track. But yeah, I think 1 hour is probably the average. I usually read right before bed, so that's just kind of a way to unwind. But yeah, it depends. Depends on what else I've got going on. But yeah, I think that the practice of memorization is so very powerful, and it's something that I, for one, have done in the past. Growing up, my mom had me memorize a lot of things, but honestly, I haven't bothered to do so in recent times, and I kind of wish I did. I think I rely so much on being able to look things up and read things that, I don't know, I think those memory muscles are really important to exercise. Okay, I really liked this quote. This is him talking about his dual nature that he's developed, trying to play the two sides of a chess game, almost a Jekyll and Hyde kind of situation. Something in me wanted to come out on top, and yet all there was for me to fight was this other me in me. So as I played, I worked myself up into a state of almost manic excitement. So I think what really interested me so much in this book, and not just the story of Dr. B, but also the first chess master, Chentovich. What really fascinated me Oh, bye, pilot. Thanks for watching. What really fascinated me was how Zweig contrasts these two characteristics. One of them being, of course, experts, right, versus everybody else. But really, the bigger picture of the physical versus the spiritual. So one of the key things in this story is the fact that Czentovich, the master, the man on his way to compete in this tournament, he needs a physical chessboard. He actually carries around a miniature chessboard in his pocket to practice with and to have as a reference point. So he really relies heavily on that, and his background is fairly uneducated. He comes from a lower class agricultural background, and he was just discovered as a child prodigy. So, the physical world of chess is very real to Czentovich, whereas with Dr. B and his struggle to survive in a Nazi prison, essentially, everything's metaphysical, mental, even on some level, maybe spiritual. And his chessboards are just in his mind. And I thought that was so interesting. And the way he plays is in a different style than the chess master. I've rambled on for that quite a bit, but I really loved this little story. I will certainly be reading it again in the future. And it's really got the wheels turning on, that whole question about the physical versus the spiritual, which is something that actually comes up a lot, I think, it's definitely come up a lot in Christianity in different variations and different theological questions. I think that he kind of delves into that here too, and it was just so satisfying. Anyway. That was Chess Story, which I just finished. I think I will certainly be checking out more books by Zweig. A book that I just received in the mail and have not been able to start yet, but I'm also looking forward to with great anticipation, is Shusaku Endo's When I Whistle. Okay, so, I've talked about Endo a lot on the blog lately. I've talked about him in my videos recently, and a lot of his books are about history of Christianity in Japan, and specifically the persecution of Christians in Japan. This book actually is not about that. This is about, I'll just read the back. When I Whistle is set largely in a modern hospital. On a commercial visit, a jaded businessman has a chance encounter that reminds him of his best friend at school, and memories are stirred of a former love interest, Aiko. His doctor's son is contemptuous of the outmoded values of his father's world and ruthless in pursuit of success at the hospital. The story moves towards a terrible climax when Aiko, now middle-aged and suffering from cancer, is admitted to the hospital, and Ozu's son chooses to lead the way in experimenting on her with dangerous drugs. Yeah, so I'm definitely getting echoes of The Sea and Poison, which I've talked about a couple of times, also by Endo. But someone mentioned somewhere online that this also is reminiscent of Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Another one I did a video on, I want to say last fall? Or was it this spring? Can't keep track of time anymore, but anyway. Obviously some heavy topics here, but it is different than the other books by him I've been reading lately. And as usual, his style looks incredibly accessible, and I'm very excited to read this. It's very highly rated online, and I feel like Endo is one of those authors I just click with, which hasn't happened in a while, so I was feeling that a little bit with Hermann Hesse, but I don't know. Steppenwolf was kind of... Did I talk about Steppenwolf? I don't think I really talked about Steppenwolf on the YouTube channel, but I talked about it on my blog. It was kind of a disappointment, so the jury's still out on Hesse and how I get along with him. Okay, so I think what I'll be doing here, because I didn't really have anything else to talk about. Did you guys have anything that you wanted to share? Anything you're reading currently? Or suggestions for videos? I do have a list of videos I'm going to be making or have plans to. One of them is been requested, and it's poems that you, or favorite poems, I should say. So what I thought I would do now is read one of them as just, I don't know, a sneak peek. And this isn't going to be the full video, obviously. But why not read one of them now? So this collection is called Minorities by T.E. Lawrence of Arabia. Good poems by small poets and small poems by good poets. So this was basically his playlist, if you will, that he took with him, or collected rather, over the years. And it's quite an eclectic collection, as you might expect from someone who had such traumatic experiences that he did. There's just quite a range of subject matter and style and everything. So, but my favorite poem from this, well, there were a couple of poems I really liked, but my favorite is one called The Owl. So let me see if I can find it. I think this is it right here. The Owl by Edward Thomas is, I think, his name. Let me double check. The only bad thing about this is that it doesn't tell the title or the author, so you have to go look it up somewhere. List of poems. Here we go. You know, I don't know. I just don't know if I like that or not. It's kind of odd. Yeah, Edward Thomas. Interestingly, the inversion of Lawrence's name, Thomas Edward. 1920. All right. The Owl. Downhill I came, hungry and yet not starved. Cold, yet had heat within me that was proof against the north wind. Tired, yet so that rest had seemed the sweetest thing under a roof. Then at the inn I had food, fire, and rest. Knowing how hungry, cold, and tired was I, all of the night was quite barred out except an owl's cry, a most melancholy cry. Shaken out long and clear upon the hill, no merry note nor cause of merriment, but one telling me plain what I escaped, and others could not, that night, as in I went. And salted was my food and my repose, salted and sobered too by the bird's voice, speaking for all who lay under the stars, soldiers and poor, unable to rejoice. It's a very melancholy poem, but I just really like that one a lot. Here's another bittersweet one. This is, let's see. James Shirley, Death the Leveler. I don't know how old this is, but presumably 1930s or older. Death the Leveler by James Shirley. The glories of our blood and state are shadows, not substantial things. There is no armor against fate. Death lays his icy hand on kings. Scepter and crown must tumble down, and in the dust be made equal. And in the dust be equal made with the poor crooked scythe and spade. Scythe. Scythe? Scythe? My pronunciations aren't the best sometimes. Okay, second stanza. Some men with swords may reap the field and plant fresh laurels where they kill, but their strong nerves at last must yield. They tame but one another still. Early or late they stoop to fate and must give up their murmuring breath when they pale captives creep to death. The garlands wither on your brow, then boast no more your mighty deeds. Upon death's purple altar now, see where the victim bleeds. Your heads must come to the cold tomb, only the actions of the just smell sweet and blossom in their dust. Siegfried Sassoon, everyone sang. Everyone suddenly burst out singing, and I was filled with such delight as prisoned birds must find in freedom, winging wildly across the white orchards and dark green fields, on and out of sight. Everyone's voice was suddenly lifted, and beauty came like the setting sun. My heart was shaken with tears and horror, drifted away. Oh, but everyone was a bird, and the song was wordless. The singing will never be done. Hi, Buck. This is just a impromptu live stream. I actually kind of finished talking about what I was reading, and I'm just doing some poetry now. But I'll just mention what I was reading really quickly. Just give a 2-cent summary for anyone who might have joined a little late. So, first thing I talked about was, First thing I talked about was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I'm about 2/3 through that. And I'm really feeling the suspense is growing, and I definitely want to find out how it ends. I feel like the characterizations and the pacing are a bit slow for me. But yeah, I'm still not sure how I feel about The Secret History yet. Another book that I read in the last couple of days was Chess Story by Stefan Zweig. Really, really liked this book. I think I spent, 20 minutes rambling about it. This is about a chess game that takes place on a ship that's bound for Argentina from New York, and a chess master is, he's like challenged by this nobody, this Dr. B, who just stumbles across him, and they have this game. And what I really enjoyed about this book was the style, how it was written. It really is so engaging from the beginning, and it uses humor to draw you in, and then it gradually builds up to this intense flashback, actually, and talks about how this outsider chess player, how he learned to play chess during solitary confinement, and how that really, it both gave him something to really hold on to mentally, but then it sort of turned against him in the end too, and it was very bad for his mental health. So it's a very intense story, but beautifully written. It's only about 60 pages, and I don't know, I'm still thinking about it. There's a lot of topics that it just hits upon, both history and personal and philosophical. So yeah, Chess Story, would highly recommend it. And then other than that, I've been reading Wilson Harris's Palace of the Peacock, which is a novel from Guyana, and it's like the beginning of a set of 4 books. And it's sort of semi-related to Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, so I'm rereading that one alongside it. This book is kind of hard to understand in places, but hopefully as it goes on I will grasp it better. I didn't plan to live stream this evening. It just sort of happened. What I wanted to do really was do a more edited video, but I realized I wasn't going to have any time to actually edit it. So here we are. Oh yeah, and then I was just going to mention, and you probably saw this on the blog, but Endo's When I Whistle. I haven't started it yet, but really looking forward to this book a lot. Interesting. It just says the chat disconnected on my side. I don't know why. Oops. So hopefully the stream is still going. Anyway, I'm assuming the stream is still working. So I was just going to wrap up with some readings from this collection of poetry. There you are. I see that. Okay. I don't know what was going on there. Okay, yeah, it looks like it's working, so that's good. That's the first time I've ever seen that happen, so kind of weird. So I was just reading some poems. I was mentioning that soon we'll hopefully do the reading favorite poems video, and then a couple of them, or at least one of them, is going to be from this book, which is Lawrence of Arabia's poems that he collected during his life. Some of them are actually really good. So I read one called The Owl, which I think will be in the video. And then I'm just kind of going through the ones I marked here. I like this one a lot. Now, it's interesting because it's such a diverse collection that you'll find poems both sacred and profane. This is one of those sacred ones, I would say, reverent ones. This is Ralph Hodgson, The Mystery, published in 1917. He came and took me by the hand up to a red rose tree. He kept his meaning to himself, but gave a rose to me. I did not pray him to lay bare the mystery to me. Enough the rose was heaven to smell, and his own face to see. I think a lot of people speculate on Lawrence's beliefs or lack thereof, but honestly, it's really hard to say, you know. I think he probably went back and forth quite a bit through his life. Especially having grown up in such a religious atmosphere. So this is Dream Peddlery by Thomas Lovell Beddoes, and there's no year. If there were dreams to sell, what would you buy? Some cost a passing bell, some a light sigh that shakes from life's fresh crown, only a rose leaf down. If there were dreams to sell, merry and sad to tell, and the crier rang the bell, what would you buy? A cottage lone and still, with bowers nigh, shadowy my wants to still, until they die. Such peace from life's fresh crown, fain would I shake me down, were dreams to have at will. This would best heal my ill, this would I buy. Yeah, I didn't really have a lot else planned for this video, so let me know what you guys are reading or any thoughts you might have about the channel or stuff going on. But yeah, I kind of liked this. I liked this a lot. I think it's kind of niche, obviously. I mean, how many people really want to get this collection, right? But it's kind of fun. It's neat that somebody had actually, or I should say it's neat that Lawrence actually put together a collection of poems that he really liked, and that we have that kind of insight on him. It's kind of unusual for a historical figure, maybe. Although back then I would say people were more likely to do that. They had a commonplace book where they would write things down and quotes and things. Journaling was more of a thing. I do like to journal. Been trying to do a daily journal, but I find that sometimes I'm just not in the mood. So yeah, I think that's about it. As far as what I've been doing lately, I have been trying to get back into writing and start trying to come up with a collection of poems. So I have a bunch of poems I've written, maybe I want to say 60 to 100 poems. And I would kind of like to publish them, probably self-publish them, honestly. I've been trying to figure out how to arrange them. That's the hardest part. I've tried before to arrange them, and that was when I had fewer poems, so it was a little easier. But now that I have more, it's almost like I don't know. It's do you arrange them chronologically? Do you try to sort them into similar themes? I've done a little bit of reading on this online, but there's just no one way to do it, so we shall see. I know that I want it to be divided in 3 parts, roughly, that represent 3 times in life. So I think that'll work. I'm actually tempted to read you some of it right now, although I want to keep this channel more about other people's writing, not mine. But I do have some of them here, so maybe I'll just do that and we'll wrap it up. Hi, Marlon. New Zealand, that's cool. Yeah, actually the stream is almost done for the evening. I wasn't really planning it out very well. Usually I would give people a long heads up and, we'd go for an hour or more. I guess it's been about an hour though. How about I read you just one of these? And then we'll call it a night. So, I don't know if this poem's actually even going to be in the book. This is actually a proof copy that I'd ordered from Amazon years ago. It just never manifested itself into a published book. Alright, this one's called Notes from Overground. We stood up with a jolt, all blue and teal and marbled brown. Just they and I, and bleakly you, had taken the underground. And I saw the numbers blink BC, so broadly ran the rails to me. The people merged with scenery. This even we did not foresee in 2012 AD. Light like an umbrella in a wood, upside down while all its spokes barred the way to where it stood. Then broken, writhing in my arms, they ached. A most resilient, lovely sting, the color of a glacial lake whose photosynthesis loomed overhead. What did rotten gateways bring? Yeah, it's not gonna work. I stumbled on the wooden boards, all weathered in the sand. The rain had soaked them, now no more would splinters eat my hands. And it shivered at the call of words, a string of verse till now absurd. I saw the past fall backwards, blurred beyond recall, no longer lured my ears to doubts unheard. These columns in a forest place grew hidden from a prying face, bent wearily and left no trace, no stationary edifice to build or to raise, while light beat a pathway through the spinning needle trees. An honest maze and a day's walk would meet the end, if the broken gate were not an island in the cloud forest. You had paid for your ticket already. We were anonymous now. Brick follows brick, playing leapfrog under the bemused avenue of cedars. I know where this one road leads, undiverged, unaffected by autumns with yellow leaves. This wood is green, eternal spring of tarnished trees, brush-stroked sky, rain that clings inside and leaves the raincoat dry and lets last year have its cry. Light like the sun's first smile, innocently bright, light that has never looked down at imitations of itself. I started down the brick-laid road, the webs brushed past me silvery cold. The emerald branches cringed in gold, at once both very young and old. My feet fled down the road, and running, the destination grew up in my heart. I ran, lest to stop, to lose the dream in a silent Sorn echo's scream. You watched the train barrel away and remarked on the fineness of the day. And in the same breath I betrayed the knowledge of a different way. Not only thought I had to say what beauty is left in senses frayed. In emotion liberally displayed, I laid it out in front of you, patient audience. And the disarray, the noisy yesteryear, bled away. Old happiness felt now false, old anguish like a disease to which I was immune forever. Exaggeration was almost true, for how true was terror once. Joy is a word, its definition comes only by intuition. So I don't know if that one's going to be in the poetry collection. Originally that was going to be the last poem, but then I don't know, it's a little uneven, and I think I want to keep my poetry collection a little more succinct. So I think it'll be, we'll see. That one might not be in it, but yeah, I think that's something I'm going to try to put out this fall. I will do a video on it as it gets closer, and if you're interested in following along in the process, I do have a website, and I've actually gone back to Instagram now, sort of. But anyway, I'll give some more information about that pretty soon. I think that's all I have for this evening. Thanks to everybody who dropped in. I'm sorry it was kind of on the fly and not really planned out or anything. So I will see you all soon, hopefully with another video and probably some more thoughts on the secret history. So thanks for watching. I hope you have a great rest of the evening, and see you all soon.